Welcome to the Speak with People podcast. My name is Jason Raitz. I'll be your host, and this podcast exists to help you improve your communication skills. Whether you communicate one-on-one, to a team, from a stage, or from behind a screen, we know that when we improve our communication skills as leaders, it exponentially changes everything. It improves our relationships, it improves our leadership skills, and it improves our business skills. So let's get ready to dive into this next episode. Do you ever feel left behind from your coworkers when they're absolutely crushing it in the meetings or the sales presentations when they're speaking in public? Do you wish you could get up in front and speak with confidence, clarity, and in a captivating way, even if you're just giving an update at a team meeting? Well, how can you take the necessary steps to improve? And can anyone learn these skills? How can you speak like a leader? Speak in a way that people not only listen, but they lean in and they make decisions based on what you communicated. Well, today we start a brand new series on the podcast called Speak Like a Leader. And we are so excited to kick it off with just a tremendously amazing guest. She is the CEO of Duarte. She's the author of many best-selling books. She's a TED speaker. She's influenced many, many folks. And she is such a down-to-earth, unbelievable leader and communicator. I'm just honored to have her on the podcast. Nancy Duarte, welcome to the Speak with People podcast.
I'm excited to be here, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Before we dive into our content and our conversation, maybe for our listeners who aren't quite up to speed with you yet, maybe you could share a little bit of your story, what's important to you, some of your things you're proud of, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think, I like to say presentations found me. I think in this quest of wanting to leave a mark on this earth, I definitely have pursued just that one thing, and it's yielded an incredible amount of fruit, a platform, like unexpected, never dreamed. Like if I close my eyes and it's not like I pursued it. It's like every day I just wake up and say like, what should I do today? And it's leading to these incredible outcomes.
Yes.
But yeah, I have a company in the Silicon Valley, a very antithesis of traditional Silicon Valley, female owned, fully bootstrapped, never taken outside capital or anything like that. And we've just been doing this since 1988, and wow. I'm still having fun. Like people are like, shouldn't you be drinking pina coladas? And I'm like, while I'm still having fun, I'm going to just keep going. So I don't know, we were kind of talking about this a little bit earlier about like what I'm most proud of. And I think my favorite thing about what I do, what happened, like it happened this week. I spoke at an event. I had a speaking gig this week, and my favorite thing was this gal came up to me after and she said, when you speak, something inside of me stands up. And I just like that to me, like that's what I'm proud of. It's one thing to put bodies of work out there that but to put bodies of work out there that resonate, or to have a message inside of you that transfers to someone in that way where they're like, I am more alive, or I will never be the same. Like when you get that, it's just, there's nothing, it's eternal. Like it's not even like mortal at that point. Right. And so it's totally fun.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, I wondered, as you were, you so graciously agreed to be on the podcast, and as I sent some communication and you saw the phrase speak with people, not at them, I'm always curious as I talk with guests and leaders and authors, speakers, what do you think? What did you think of when you first heard that phrase? What kind of came to your mind? I would love to get inside of that a little bit.
Yeah, I think speak at people, it sounds like a diatribe or like dictatorial, like I'm going to, or barking orders to me a little bit. Whereas speak with people sounds more communal or more empathetic, like let's do this together. And so, I mean, do I confess sometimes I speak at people? Yeah.
100%.
I mean, it's hard. Yeah. And so I have to own that I just said it sounds like a diatribe or dictatorial.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So just pausing and saying, hey, I have to speak with people. And I got, look at that. Look, I have this.
Oh,
my tea.
Look at
you. So generous. I don't know if I can even say it. It says, speak with, it's for my mint tea. I drink mint tea all day long. It's kind of a soothing thing. So take a sip.
Absolutely.
Not that this is any sort of cheesy commercial or anything like that.
Well, I have I have a friend. I'm from Michigan. I'm in Tampa now, but born and raised in Detroit. And then we lived in the middle of the mitten. That's what we call it. We put our hand up and we
Yeah.
point to it.
Yeah,
But
my
he's
son
an,
went to Interlochen Arts Academy, so I did that a
oh,
lot. I love
yes.
Michigan. I love everything
Oh,
about Michigan.
so
Yeah.
what a great camp. I so I have a friend. He makes these all by hand. They're all handmade,
Mm,
and we love to send them to our podcast guests and folks that we're working with, and it's just a blast. So
that's awesome.
it's neat people. You talk about the speak at. It is really fascinating when you're talking about healthy communication tactics and habits and skills all the time. How quickly my wife and I have 5 children. How quickly they're able to point
You've
out.
been busy.
Yes, yes, yes. But how quickly they point out the speaking at. Well, Dad, let's step back for a second here. Was that the healthiest choice of words?
That's like my husband. He'll be like, "What? You want a communication guru award again? Like, you don't even use verbs sometimes when you speak with me." It's the same thing. He's like, "I don't know who's handing out those awards, but they didn't ask me."
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, we have listeners who are professional speakers. I've been on stages
Cool.
for a long time, but a giant part of our listeners are what I like to call the everyday leaders. They're going into the office, they're doing Zoom trainings, they're doing updates, they're doing sales presentations that they watch maybe other coworkers do, and they just think, "Oh, if I could just improve, just a few steps." How could you kind of take us through maybe some actionable steps, for those leaders to go, okay, this is something you can do. Here are some steps that would really propel your speaking and your leadership.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that because speakers get nervous, they get scared. A lot
Mm,
of times it becomes a lot about me. Like it's like, oh, and I think if you flip the script and say, look, you're not really the star of the show. They're just there to get what they need from you. It's really a
yeah.
lot about the audience. So it's like it's hard to say that, but don't make it about you because your fight or flight instinct is kicking
Mm,
in, and for some reason, something about this is making you feel like you're there's a threat. There's something threatening in the audience, whether it's judgment or like, but something is kind of, co-opted your brain to think I'm in a very threatening situation. And so in our course Captivate, we teach people how to communicate from their core, which is like
mm,
your purpose, your passion. So once you need to kind of tap into your kind of your gut, your like
mm,
why you exist, what makes you so passionate. We have teach them to dip into that and tap into that, and then speak, and then speak from that place.
mm.
And it's just really powerful. I mean, it is a really powerful moment for most people.
Wow.
So I would say those are a
I,
couple steps
I
people
love
could
that.
take.
I love
Yeah.
that. Why do you think it is so many leaders? If they're not on a stage, if they don't have a giant platform, they just think, no, I just don't have anything to offer. And maybe even coming up with a purpose, their life mission. Why do you think so many just continue to live in that category instead of going, wait a minute, I'm the only me that's ever been put on this planet. I'm going to find out my purpose and tell the world about it.
Because I think it takes work. It
Mm,
takes it takes honesty. It takes self evaluation. It takes what's interesting to me a little bit too is it's almost the opposite is true. So there's people who it's so tough to get them to want to be on the stage, but I think their messages are some of the most important we need to hear. There's people
yes.
like me or you or whatever. You can show up at a meeting and just be like, blah, blah, like speak at people, like blah, 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 totally
Yes.
comfortable just going at it without maybe having the proper guardrails that somebody who's a little more nervous to speak puts.
Yep.
They're nervous to speak because they have proper guardrails. We can just blather because maybe we need some guardrails. So it's not. It's very interesting, and I think that some people are afraid to really ask themselves, why am I here? How can I create meaning?
Mm,
What is it something, because if you're not passionate about the subject matter that you're talking about, we ask them to think of something. Maybe it's their kids, maybe it's their this, maybe it's that. Just tap into this thing that brings you meaning and have it ground you
yep.
before you create your content or before you walk on stage. So I think that's a place people don't get permission to go to during work hours.
Mm,
I think you're just supposed to show up and be professional. And I think that it's almost like people who segment their personal life from their work life have a hard time kind of tapping into purpose and meaning and things like that. But
absolutely.
we think it's important. Our method would say that's a very important step.
Absolutely. I was just on a podcast named Productive Joy. And I
Oh, I
thought,
love
oh,
that name.
what a great name. And the host, she asked such great questions about how do you get to that place in your work where, you're just experiencing joy, whether it's, doing an update in the team meeting or submitting the P&L, whatever it is.
That's
I mean,
nice.
that's such a powerful place to get to. As we think about the leader who's sitting in a team meeting, hoping the boss doesn't call on them, to stand up in front of the team and say, hey, give us an update. Why do you think it's important? I guess I live under the premise that every one of us has the ability to be able to do that and do it without our knees buckling, sweat rolling down. We may never all be Simon Sinek, but we can all be us and be able to communicate and speak like a leader.
Yeah.
What encouragement would you give for some leaders, to be able to apply themselves that way?
Yeah, I love that you brought it up that it's in a meeting, because sometimes people hear public speaking and they're like, well, I don't go on stages, so I don't
Right.
need to work. I'm not a public speaker. But I think some of the most critical moments of communication are so if public speaking is one to many, you could call a meeting one to one, and you can call a little like a one-on-one, you call a one-to-one, and a one-to-few is a meeting situation. And
Mm,
that to me is one of the most critical communication mechanisms at work, because so many decisions are made, so many things advance in a meeting, right?
yes.
And so what needs to happen is they need to believe in their idea enough. So like speak up for the sake of your idea,
Ooh,
because I think so many people who are a little nervous to speak, some of them come from what I would call STEM jobs, right? And they're just like, look, let me just do my research, or let me just dig into a spreadsheet. Like, why do I have to
yeah.
stand and deliver? And it's because those deeper thinkers have the answers, but they don't get the table very often, right? The
Yes.
ones that barely speak are the ones usually we need to hear from the most.
Mm,
And so I think I would just encourage them to do it for the sake of the idea, or the sake for the action the room needs to
mm.
take in service of your idea. So God, I implore the people listening to, or do it for the sake of the organization if you love the organization, or the sake of your career. Goodness sakes, like, you
Yes.
want to increase your wallet, speak up and have answers, and it'll increase your wallet, and it'll increase the profit and revenue of the company you serve.
And that's so true. I've read so many, whether it's a Harvard Business Review article or whatever research it is, for the employees, for the team members who they learn how to effectively communicate. They do it in a way that people start to listen. It seems like promotions, advancements, like you just talked about, more money,
Yeah.
those kind of things come to them. One of my favorite parts of leading staff over the years has been finding that staff member who didn't want to be upfront, building the trust with them, and then
Love
finally
that.
getting them to that place, and then pushing them
Yeah.
off the ledge.
Wow, is that what you do?
Well, lovingly.
We give them a spot award.
But I love what happens in their leadership when they go, oh, wait a minute, I can do this. I do have a voice. I mean, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing when they find it.
You talked about the Captivate program earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a story? Is there a moment of someone who, you guys have helped being able to go through it where they've just been able to, transform their speaking kind of for that person, what made it effective?
Yeah, I loved this question. So I sent a note to my facilitators to be like, hey, give me some, fresh examples.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the examples I got back were mostly stories of women, which I thought was interesting. I think sometimes it is harder for gals to find their voice in a somewhat male dominated
Hmm.
environment. But what was interesting is there, it's just this kind of classic persona where they show up. They're nervous. They think they're too nervous to speak in front of their
Mm.
peers, especially their peers or strangers. And so one of the stories was, well, so what I did is I said, look, don't just observe. And the minute you feel comfortable jumping in, jump in. And sure enough, she warmed up, contributed, and got, great feedback from her peers. But then there's ones with like such gripping stage fright where one of my facilitators told me a story where the woman actually sat in the car for 30 minutes outside of the art public workshop and was just like, it took her 30 minutes just to get the bravery to walk in the door
Ooh.
for a class she'd signed up and paid for,
Yep.
right? And so it's like during coaching, she after doing the core work, starts to find her confidence. Core work really helped. First time presenting, people are like, what have you been so afraid of? That whole
Yes.
thing, and eventually, like, so first ran through it with her notes, was super great. And then it's like, you are a subject matter expert.
Mm.
Now just talk to us like you're, and just killed it. Just like killed it. And so, and then when she left, it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I'm going to keep practicing, and that's the
Yep.
best thing. Because I think once they get over it, they start to see the power of what's coming out of their mouths and the
Yes.
interest in the audience. Like it's just getting over that first bit. And I do think our workshops create this, relatively fun, very safe environment where whether you're there with your peers, which sometimes is more intimidating than being there with strangers, but either way, I think people really get to work on their stuff, like
Mm.
their personal stuff, but also their delivery, their content and delivery, which is super good.
Yeah, I love that. I was doing a podcast interview last night, actually, for a woman who was one of the first in her field in oil and gas to become
Wow.
a vice president. Yeah, for this Fortune 200 company in Texas, and
Of
she's
course.
one of the only women executives. And so it was fascinating hearing some of her stories. But it got us down this road on just what's the difference between companies who do invest in their employees, provide opportunities
Yeah.
for their team to be able to go through Captivate or other programs. You've been doing this for some time now. Do you see an ebb and flow? Do you see companies leaning more into it? Do larger companies invest more in their employees? Do smaller companies, just because they're just trying to hold it all together, they don't? I'd love your perspective on that.
I think that, well, first of all, for I don't know how many years in a row now, the number one skills gap that people have, like unilaterally, is communication skills. And the number one of that is oral communication skills. So
Mm.
the companies, number one, that understand the competitive advantage of having people who can speak well. It's not just the speaking, because the number two skill is writing. And so you have
Right.
to write the speech to be able to communicate it. So number
Right.
one, number two skill, writing, speaking. So number one, companies who want to advance in their market or dominate their market, call us. But that other big thing is they found that retention is the number one concern right now. I have a bunch of friends who serve on public boards. Number one conversation on public boards is retention. And
Mm.
what's interesting about our body of work is because it's laced with storytelling, story principles. Story by its nature creates belonging and stickiness and
Mm.
meaning. So we're also finding people say, hey, we need to have a more communal, sticky workforce. And so people are investing in training so the employees feel believed in, and then they're attracted to our body of work because it creates meaning in the workplace, which is
Mm.
also another retention thing. So it's kind of, there's different ways people approach it. One of my favorites is people who spend their own money to come, right? Ones who put their own credit card down to come in
Right.
because they're like, I need this, And so there's the solopreneurs or even, we've even had people at big companies just say, hey, I just want to come and it's a gift to myself.
Mm.
So, they come every which way, but we mostly deal with companies that are buying it, but we do have a lot of people come through as individuals too.
Boy, I love that. You said something that my radars were going off. I mean, story is, everything. And
Yeah.
I love, reading all of Donald Miller's stuff about story, Kendra
Oh, yeah.
Hall's Story Worthy by Matthew Dix. I mean, there's just so much great out there about story. I wonder why more companies, large or small, don't have just an internal storyteller. if story is what captivates our attention, drives us, why do we not have someone who's just making sure that everybody who works for the company, even if it's just an internal storyteller, is telling the story of what's happening, because you may not know 2 departments down that, so-and-so just went through this thing. And so it's always confusing to me when, I look at some companies and I'm like, but you're really not telling the story of, and it's just wild to me.
It is interesting because the story of the company kind of falls into this no man's land. Either the
Right.
executive team owns it, some think marketing owns it, some would think HR owns it because it might be touchy-feely values and stuff like that. And so the greater companies do have chief storytellers.
Yes.
Microsoft has had that. Nike has that. Atlassian has it. Like, there are chief storytellers. I do think that the CEO of any company should be a chief storyteller. It should model the nature. However, the CEO models how communication should be done, that's the company will follow. And so there is a systemic way to get story to be systemic at the company.
Yes. Yes. Do you see a switch in communication? I worked in an MBA years ago, and one of our classes, they handed us the classic Primal Leadership by Daniel Goleman. And up until that point, I had kind of experienced leadership and communication from a heavy fist. The people above me, if they communicated, it was in a heavy way. It was you got to get this done. And then I read this book, and it was like, wait a minute, we can actually tap into people's positive emotions, and they'll be more productive. They'll love their jobs more. Do you have hope, for where we're going company wise? Do you think that's changed? I'd love your perspective as you work with companies.
It's hard. Every company has a set of goals, right? And it's to change millions of lives. It's to reach a financial goal so they can pay out profit sharing or whatever. There's a set of goals. And I do believe most everyone's goals are altruistic. But there is a balance, right? It is more work to tap it, to plan right before a meeting, think about who's in the room. How does this person receive information versus this person versus this person? So you had, Megan and Nicole who wrote Adaptive Listening, and it does require you pause, think about who's in the room, think about how you show up. But you know what? I go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. Sometimes I'm my finest self. Sometimes I have people in the room that I could trust where I could just be like, hey, hey, y'all go fix it, go figure it out or whatever, right? And they know me and they're like, oh, great, that was quick and fast. More of that, please. And others are like, could you not be directive, or complete misunderstandings where, and it happens and it's sad and it's, I don't want anyone to think that, I've got this nailed. Just talk to my husband.
Right.
But when there's a gap in how things are going, that's a moment for incredible clarity. So we're good, even though we're not that big. We're just 100 and a quarter. I don't know how many exact count we have right now, but we have a lot of freelancers and stuff too to add to that. But anyway, as far as will we change, I think we do a good job. I think we do better than most. I think most of my employees love how things are communicated up and down. We have monthly all hands meetings. We do quarterly bigger meetings. We do 2-year annual offsites. We in service of communicating vision, what the expectations and all that. We have a way to cascade everyone's goals. And so when you have something to do and you have to cascade a goal, I do think it's fair for the leader to say, hey, here's the goals we need to achieve. Let's have a conversation about how you map into that.
For sure.
And so there is there has to be some decisions that cascade. Other decisions can be collaborative. So it just depends. And I think everyone wants to be a healthier environment. There's a generation coming up that has a lot more needs for the workplace to fulfill a lot more needs than the workplace has ever had to fill. And I'm fine to step into that gap, but that's been a really hard gap to fill. Where everything is, especially at a communication company, everything has to be framed perfectly. We have high expectations of our own selves, and I blow it. Of course I do. Just because the speed in which I work and the volume just of meetings, like when am I supposed to actually get my job done? And so I think I would say if you're a leader, be kind to yourself. We can't do it perfect. I think sometimes the only time I go to bed crying in my pillow is when I didn't communicate well, and it either caused someone pain or it cost them time, because time is my love language. And I'm like, oh, I didn't communicate well. Oh my gosh, that took you 20 hours. I thought that was an hour-long ask. And that'll actually make me cry weirdly, because I'm like, oh my God, you could have been so much more productive. And I came between you and productivity.
Yeah.
Actually, it's so weird, only because that hits a nerve because of time being my love language. But that is probably the only thing that really brings me to my knees, is when there's been a gap
Yes.
in my intent and how I communicated it, and then how it was received. And I think that should give every leader pause. I
Yes.
think if it did, we wouldn't have politicians screaming at each other. We'd conscientiously think of those we're speaking to and make it about them and not about your adversary. It's
Yeah.
just, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's just a lot there. I love that question.
Oh, so good. It's such a
I'm
wild.
going to pick up your mug and drink from it, because I like that
Perfect.
question so much, Jason.
Well, as you talk about that, it's so fascinating. You turn on, whatever media it is, and the civility. Shola Richards is one of my favorite communicators on the planet. He talks a lot about civility, and especially in politics, the civility just, to me, it seems like it's gone. How can we get to a place where our words are laced with respect and kindness? Like you talk about, we're all humans. We're going to make mistakes. But if the foundation is healthy, if our inner world is healthy, when those moments come up where, oh, I cannot believe I hurt someone. How did that come out of my mouth? I think they will, our team will know us well enough to be able to accept our apology, to be able to say, boy, I missed the
so much
mark.
power in the spoken word. I think that's what, makes your work my work. So powerful, and there's power to build and power to tear down. So when I know I said or did something that I unintentionally, I've never enter a meeting and be like, I'm gonna tear you down.
Yep.
But just knowing that one simple thing can do that always makes me pause.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk so much about public speaking, and we love to communicate that way, but that one-on-one communication, all of us, we can remember those little daggers that were said to us, or the words that totally vaulted our life to a whole other direction. I mean, it's just,
and it's always nice when you get a dagger to clarify and be like, that feels a bit like a dagger. And that helps the other person. They're like, oh my God. Because then you get to intent. They're like,
right.
Oh, that hurt your feelings. I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh, let me clarify or whatever.
Right.
But not a lot of people have a bravery to do that. Ask that of their leader and be like, wait a minute, that stings. Can we chat about that?
Yes.
But,
well, and that's why I loved Nicole and Megan's book, Adaptive Listening, so much, because I love the said listening style. If you, we talk a lot about DISC in companies, working genius. I mean, we have all the different type, they're all there, Enneagram, but with listening, if what a crazy reality. For whatever reason, I found myself doing lots of communication skills training for people in the financial industry. So financial advisors, licensed bankers. And it turns out that they really want to be good at communication skills, because, they're dealing with people's money and all of that kind of stuff. But I recommend the adaptive listening and the said listening style, because I'm like, as you listen to your client, they're listening in a different way you are. And it's just so important to be able to have the right filter and the right.
Yeah. And we've bought into it systemically as a company. So, I mean, it wasn't intentionally built this way, but they're like, oh my God, when you start to recognize, oh, you want me to be a support listener, or, oh, you're wanting me to discern right now. Now we can use shorthand. They're like, yeah. Oh, I should have told you.
Yes.
You can actually define hey, this is why I want you to listen to me. Right. And it brings so much clarity. And then I shut my mouth.
Yep.
If you don't want me to advance your thing and you just want me to immerse, I'll just sit here and nod and smile and listen and think, and it just it helps me. Oh my gosh. Because every time I'm in a meeting, my baseline is you want me to advance. You're only coming to me if you want me to advance it or discern it. And so it's been very helpful for me. Changed me.
I love that. Well, swinging back towards this idea of speaking like a leader, being able to speak with confidence, kind of in a captivating way. So many communicators, the nerves hit them right off the bat. The knees buckle, the sweat starts to roll. What if I'm going to say something the wrong way? techniques you can give to help, our listeners just combat those nerves, that anxiety?
Yeah, it is that fight or flight, like we were talking about. It's like, and I've only gotten really nervous a few times. One of the times was I was heavily medicated, so I think it was the acetaminophen.
Yeah.
And then other times it's just the scale of the people in the audience. Like, and one time it was like James Cameron was like right there, and I'm talking about story, I'm like, but then sometimes just randomly I'll get just nervous. So I advise my advice. I have a blog and a LinkedIn article about your pre-talk ritual. So if you do find out my name and the words pre-talk ritual, that to me is one of the most important things to figure out what yours is. So I interviewed a bunch of public speakers, and some of them were like, yeah, I play heavy metal music, and and I swing my head around, and another one's like, yeah, I briskly walk around the convention center, and sometimes I jump forward, like, these
Yes.
kind of like psych yourself up pre-talk rituals. Others were like, I'm very quiet. I still myself. I meditate. I listen to calming music, whatever.
Yep.
I tend to already be a little over the top in my energy. So I do calming things. Like when I'm at a gig and there's a green room and everyone's in there talking and laughing, and like I'll fly by, and if all the people are in there not calming themselves down, I don't go in. I find a very dark corner somewhere, face the corner. I breathe. I visualize. I imagine myself delivering it to the audience. I picture the audience. I picture how I'm going to look them in the eye. What do they look like? I picture them caring about me. I picture them being very interested in what I'm about to say. And then I'm mostly there to just ground myself. And that's what I need. It's what I need. I'm not because I'm nervous even. It's just because that's what I have to do. I did this one thing. So after I interviewed these, it was mostly guys that wanted to beat their head and do the music. And so I tried it. All I did was some power poses. I was backstage, massive medical company, massive biotech company. And I just did some like stretches, and I kind of did I touched my toes up, down 3 times. That's it. I just did that. That's all I did. Walked on stage. Well, I did have a hot flash during it, but anyway, I'm on the stage. Think pretty much killed it, fell right within the time frame. But at one point I took my coat off and set it on the chair on the stage. And I get a call. The customer is like, calls my assistant, is like, we are actually very concerned about Nancy. We think she might be sick. She was chuffing in the microphone. And it was just because I did a little bit of one thing that got my heart rate up, and I shouldn't have. And so it was like lesson learned. I gave him a huge discount on my speaking fee. And, because I was like, no, they were like, she even threw the microphone across the stage. I'm like, what? I'm like, so I had, anyway, the speaking bureau watched the video, and they're like, we didn't see any of this stuff. I think they just want a discount on your fee. I'm like, yeah, just give it to them for free. I don't even care. Like, I don't. Anyway, it was just weird. But yeah, so make sure you know your own pre-talk ritual, and only do that. And that just comes from trial and error. And it's a little bit like what we were talking about, is to ground yourself in your core and your purpose. And that's what I do. I just recenter. Why am I doing this? It's to bring meaning, to bring values, to have people stand up tall inside themselves. Like, ground yourself in why you do it. And I need more of that than, heavy metal, prancing around a convention center, getting myself amped up,
Yes. So. Yes. I listen to Hootie and the Blowfish. They are my band. My office wall, I have a whole...
something super funny. Sometimes if someone says watches, it's funny, I just save it. And sometimes that will change my chemistry. But you have a whole wall what?
I have a whole Hootie wall. So I am... Oh my gosh. I know. I'm all in when it comes to Hootie.
That's awesome.
Well, hey, last question, and maybe more of a selfish question, but, I've started to speak with people a year and a half ago. We're helping leaders improve their communication skills so they can expand their influence. Our premise with speaking with people is healthy communication is oxygen for our relationships and our leadership. So when you speak into people, you breathe life. It's healthy communication. When you speak at people, you suck the life out of them. And it's unhealthy communication. Awesome. So we're doing our best to, give leaders those skills, whether it's one-on-one, on a stage, to a team, or from a screen. So that's kind of our framework.
That's awesome.
Is there any advice you would just give a young business? Well, I'm not so young, but the business is young, as the gray hair attests to.
I'm not young either. Apparently, I was at a speaking gig, and a wee young pup that could almost be my grandson was like, how old are you? And I was like, that's either a compliment or I should be concerned. Sorry about that. So repeat your question. You want me to give one piece of advice for?
Yeah, piece of advice for, a young business, especially in the content, thought world, as we're developing courses, programs, as I go out and speak. And our dream is to eventually have a team of speakers and a team of podcast hosts. And we've got a giant vision, but we're just, we're trying to do the best we can to help people now. So I'd love any advice that you would have.
Yeah, I think I would say that to really understand empathy, if I was to leave with one nugget, and at Duarte, we define empathy as know yourself and kind of love thyself, right? Accept thyself. Know yourself, understand others, and adapt to them, which is very much what you believe in. And I think if leaders can do that, I'm a little bit slow on the uptake on adapting, but I try, right? And at least start to try. So I would say it's be empathy centric, which I'll say it again. It means know yourself well, understand others so you can adapt to them. That would be my one big tip to the leaders and communicators here.
Right, I love it. Let me ask you just a few rapid fire questions.
Sure.
And we're building this library for leaders, and so we'd love to get that going. I dropped my pen there. This is a tough question. Do you have a favorite speaker who you just, every time they communicate, you just go back to and go, wow, love how they filled my cup, all that kind of stuff?
I do. It's Scott Harrison. He's featured in every one of my books, and I love him as a human. I love his story. But it's been so weird. I'll be writing a book or doing, like when I was writing Data Story, I'm a member of the WELL, which is this support group, financial support group. And I went and I was like, oh my God, he didn't even read my book. And he exactly built a data story and presented it exactly how I said you should in the book. So I'm always like, dang, okay, he just fed me a case study. And he always lets me print his stuff. So I was happy. So it's definitely Scott Harrison.
Wow, I love that. Okay, is there a podcast, either guilty pleasure or leadership development, that just a go-to for you?
So if it's guilty pleasure, I love the All In podcast. I stay on top of everything in social situations. You can tell who listens to it too, because they're like blah 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 blah. And then the other one that's really good is Masters of Scale. If people don't listen to that, it's very good, especially if you're building a business.
I love that. And then lastly, is there a leadership book that if there's any other book the leader should read, this is the book that you recommend?
It's funny. I just got a post, and it sounds really weird because I would say it's like Jim Collins, Good to Great, How the Mighty, everything Jim Collins has ever written, blah, blah, blah. That would be my normal answer. But in thinking about it, and I've never done this, but I want to kind of point to my own work because we're starting to see incredible traction. I think right now with data and Data Story is specifically written for leaders. And how do you teach your company to communicate data so decisions can be made quicker? How do you shape it in the shape of a story? We are seeing a very big void there. And so I'm going to say that book. And then other book I co-authored with Patty Sanchez is powerful. It's Illuminate. It's what's the shape of a movement when you're trying to transform your org. We're being hit with so much stuff right now. Financial crisis. We've got this emergence of technology that's new. There's so many things right now are needing leaders to show up and communicate in a way that drives change. And so I've never literally ever pointed to my own books, but today I just really felt like I wanted to do that.
I love it.
For this particular audience, I'm going to recommend my own books and adaptive listening. Pick that one up.
Yes.
They may have already figured that one out.
Yes, I love it. And I mean, this one has been my go-to for many years. Resonate. And so I've recommended it to so many clients. And, so good. Well, what's the best place people can find you online? Where can we point people to?
I'm on LinkedIn. Duarte.com is the website, at Nancy Duarte on Twitter, or it's at Duarte to see the company. But Duarte.com is probably the best place. There's tons of free stuff up there. There's a section called resources, and people can get free book. They can get Resonate, a free multimedia version of Resonate up there, slide docs. There's books up there that are free. I mean, it's just videos up there that are free. So that's a great, if people really enjoyed it, they could just gobble up a bunch of free stuff up there.
I love it. Well, thank you again, Nancy. This was such an honor. So appreciate you being on the podcast and looking forward to the future.
I had a good time. Thanks, Jason.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on another episode of the Speak with People podcast. We hope that you were encouraged. We hope that you were inspired and challenged to improve your communication skills. I want to thank you again for being a part of the Speak with People podcast community. Make sure you don't miss out on being a part of the Speak with People Facebook community group. Just head to Facebook, type in Speak with People, scroll down and join our community, because every single day we're encouraging each other, we're helping each other to improve our communication skills. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next episode.